So I think a lot of people look at preparedness and it's all about buying more gear, like more batteries, more backup devices, more equipment, just more stuff. But here's something that I don't think a lot of people realize, and that is a lot of the gear that they trust the most is the first thing to fail under pressure. Because a lot of the systems that we rely on every day, like our power, our supply chains, communication, they work incredibly well right up until they don't. And when they stop working, anything built to depend on them, they just start to fall apart too. So in my opinion, real preparedness isn't just about having backups, but it is about reducing how much you depend on systems that you just don't control. Let me ask you a question. If your power went out tonight and it just stayed out longer than expected, how much of your current setup would still be working a week from now? I think that's the question that we need to be asking ourselves. The issue usually isn't that people have nothing. The issue is that a lot of people have systems they haven't truly tested for long-term reliability. Not everybody, but I think there's a lot of people out there that haven't checked their preps lately, right? Like, for example, like your battery bank. That slowly loses capacity. A backup system that works great on paper. Gear that performs well when it's brand new, but not years after sitting on a shelf. And that's, I think, where things start to break down, because preparedness has got to go deeper than buying equipment. It has to become a question of what keeps working over time. Not just what works once, not just what looks good, and not just what everyone says to buy. And there are 3 areas where I think that this matters the most, and I'm going to share them with you today. The very first area I think is super important is power. A lot of setups today are built around convenience, plug and play systems, compact batteries, easy solutions. And again, they work, but most of them come with a hidden assumption that you'll always be able to maintain, replace, or recharge them the same way that you do right now. Because the more your system depends on constant input, the less independent it actually is. Stronger setups start asking different questions. For example, what keeps working with constant intervention? What can sit and still be ready? What can be maintained without relying on fragile supply chains? That's where the real resilience, it starts to show up. Question: what's your current backup power setup right now? Is it a generator, solar, a battery bank, all of the above, something else? The second area is warmth. Most people think staying warm just means layers, more bulk, more gear. And yes, that works, but the real issue isn't just cold. It's how fast you lose heat. So once you understand that, I think everything changes. So instead of asking what keeps me warm, maybe start asking what still works when conditions aren't ideal, like when it's wet, when it's cold for days, when you can't rotate gear, when nothing dries properly. Because independence is not about perfect conditions. It's about staying functional when conditions aren't. And then the third area I think is super important is communication. And this is where a lot of people have more confidence than I think they should, because most people rely on systems that they don't control. The cell towers, the internet, the centralized infrastructure. And again, they work until they don't. The storms they roll through, the power goes out, networks get overloaded or go down. And now your phone, it's not really a plan anymore. So the real question becomes, what communication do you actually control? Not just access to, but control over. Because the more control you have, the less vulnerable you are to things outside your influence. And that's where layered communication and community becomes powerful. Not isolation, connection that doesn't depend on a single system working perfectly. And this is where I think things like radios come in. A lot of people look at the ham radio. I think it's one of the few systems that can still work when everything else doesn't. But I do know in Canada, you got to follow the rules, because if you access it and you don't have a license to transmit, there can be, I think the penalties can be pretty steep. But even just learning how it works, like listening in and understanding the capability, that alone puts you ahead of most people, because it all comes back to this. The more options you have, the less dependent you are on any one system. Like, let me ask you, do you actually have a communication plan with someone right now? Or is it still something that you've been meaning to set up? So when you zoom out, the goal isn't to disconnect from everything. It's to avoid being fully dependent on any one system. You can still use modern systems. You just don't want them to be your only option, because resilience, it comes from options, and independence comes from not needing everything to work perfectly at the same time. So that's a wrap for today, but I have a question that I think is a better question to build around, and that's, what parts of my setup still work if systems around me stop working? I think that question changes everything. And just before we go, what's one piece of gear or system that you've tested that actually held up better than expected? Please drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your ideas. And if you want to connect with more people building real world preparedness, check out our platform, preppingcommunities.com, where membership is free, because one of the most important parts of preparedness, it's not just about what you have, it's about who you can build with. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today, guys. I will see you in the next video.